Have you ever stood right in front of the person you love, yet it felt like the two of you were speaking different languages, even while living under the same roof? Today's video is my real story in Denmark, where the winter cold was never as painful as the silence between us. If you're tired, discouraged, or secretly wondering whether your marriage door has already closed, stay with me for these next 20 minutes. The door to our life. Imagine standing in front of a door that's already open, yet your feet feel glued to the floor as if fear itself is holding you still. That was exactly what my marriage felt like in those early days of living together in Denmark. A country so quiet and orderly that every sigh between two people in the same apartment echoes louder than the winter wind sliding across the window glass. People think marriages break because of big arguments. They don't. They crack from tiny things that seem harmless at first. A glance that dodges contact, a rushed "I'm fine," or a hug that feels like it's missing a heartbeat, and a truth. The human brain is ridiculous sometimes. It always chooses to avoid pain instead of facing it. I remember holding the doorknob of our first apartment in Odense, our first home together. It should have felt like opening a new chapter. Instead, it felt like I was stepping into an exam on how to be a good partner. Everything was too quiet, too perfect, too delicate. It made me terrified that if I said one wrong thing, the whole room would shatter like thin glass. And when you're afraid of breaking something, you accidentally stop touching it at all. There were evenings when I sat on the sofa, watching the warm yellow light spill onto the cold wooden floor and wondered, why do we talk so little? It wasn't because we didn't love each other. It was because we loved each other so much that we were scared to cause harm. Psychology has a term for this: avoidant protection. Protecting the relationship by avoiding each other. Sounds stupid, right? But at the time it was the most natural defense mechanism for both of us. One of us afraid of saying the wrong thing, the other afraid of exposing raw feelings. And so the distance grew, quietly, elegantly, and sharply. Every time I wanted to share something, my heartbeat echoed like the kitchen clock, slow, loud, and almost warning me, careful. If you say it out loud, things might break. But here's the irony. It was the silence, not the words, that was slowly breaking us. And the moment I realized that, I understood something important. Our marriage door had never actually closed. It was still open, waiting for us to step inside together with honesty instead of fear. That was when this story truly began. Not about learning English, not about living abroad, but about two people trying to learn how to hear each other again. To listen with patience. To speak without armor. To love without hiding. Cold mornings, colder distance. Picture this. You wake up in a country where the sun rises late, the air bites your skin, and the silence in the apartment feels colder than the temperature outside. That was Denmark for us during that phase of our marriage. The mornings in Copenhagen didn't just chill my hands, they chilled the space between us. It's strange how a shared bed can feel like two separate continents when emotions freeze. And the truth is, emotional coldness spreads faster than winter air. It seeps into routines, meals, even the way two people breathe next to each other. I remember one morning so vividly it still plays like slow motion. I was standing by the window watching tiny snowflakes drift down like they were taking their sweet time to land, almost mocking me for rushing through everything except the one thing that mattered: connection. My partner walked past me into the kitchen, offering a soft good morning. And for a second the entire room felt scripted. We weren't fighting. We weren't angry. We were just distant. That kind of distance is the cruelest because you can't point at it. You can only feel it tightening around you like a scarf pulled a little too tight. Your brain, by the way, hates uncertainty. It would rather create a dramatic storyline than sit quietly with discomfort. So mine did exactly that. Maybe they're tired of you. Maybe you're too much. Maybe this marriage is slowly dying, and you're pretending not to see it. And once your mind starts that nonsense, it's like giving a toddler sugar. Chaos is guaranteed. But here's what I didn't know then. Emotional distance is often just a signal, not a sentence. Psychology calls it protective withdrawal. When two people feel overwhelmed, they don't scream, they retreat. They pull back, step quietly into their own worlds, and wait for the emotional storm to pass. Except storms don't pass on their own inside a house. Someone has to open a window. And for us, the cold Danish mornings became mirrors. The icy air that hit my face when I opened the balcony door felt exactly like the air between us. Sharp, still, honest. It forced me to ask questions I had been avoiding. Was I being present? Was I listening? Was I participating in the marriage or just orbiting around it, hoping things would magically fix themselves? The punchline? Coldness doesn't mean the end. Sometimes it's just a reminder that warmth requires intention, not luck. Words we couldn't say. There's a strange moment in every relationship when you realize the problem isn't what you're saying. It's what you cannot bring yourself to say. And for us, that moment stretched across weeks like a thin, invisible thread neither of us dared to touch. You'd think that two adults in love could sit down and talk honestly, right? But the mind has a wicked sense of humor. It convinces you that staying quiet keeps the peace when in reality, silence is just conflict wearing a fancy coat. I remember one evening in our little Danish apartment, the kind of evening where everything looks perfect from the outside. Warm lights, dinner on the table, 2 bowls of steaming soup. But perfection is a great liar. We sat across from each other, clinking spoons gently like we were afraid of waking something up. And the ridiculous part? Both of us were drowning in thoughts we didn't dare speak. My mind kept whispering, "Tell them you feel lonely." Their eyes were silently saying, "Ask me why I've pulled back." But neither of us broke the sound barrier. Humans are wired horribly for emotional conversations. Neuroscience actually proves it. When you anticipate conflict, your amygdala fires up like a car alarm, convincing you that telling the truth is dangerous. That's why couples can talk about groceries, laundry, and travel plans with Olympic-level fluency, but choke when asked, "Are you okay?" Our brains treat emotional honesty like a bear attack. One night, I tried to open up. Just a little. I said, "I feel like we're not as close lately." A simple sentence. But even as the words left my mouth, my heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. They paused, nodded, and said, "Yeah, maybe." And that was it. Conversation over. 2 emotionally constipated adults pretending that acknowledgement equals resolution. And it wasn't that we didn't care. We cared too much. That was the problem. We were terrified that saying the wrong thing would make the other person feel unloved or blamed. So we left entire paragraphs unsaid, hoping the other would magically read our minds. Spoiler: no one is psychic, not even the person who knows your coffee order and the way you like your socks folded. But the silence did something subtle. It built a wall. A soft wall padded with good intentions and fear. A wall we walked around daily pretending it wasn't there. And even though we still slept side by side, smiling for photos and sharing warm blankets, the distance grew. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady like a slow leak in a tire you don't notice until you're stranded. The real twist? Words don't hurt relationships. The lack of them does. Speech is messy and perfect, awkward, but it's how love breathes. Without it, even the strongest bond starts running out of oxygen. A fight in the kitchen. Every marriage has that one argument you never forget. Not because it was big, but because it revealed something you didn't know you were hiding from. Ours happened in the most unromantic place imaginable. The kitchen. You'd think a kitchen fight would involve something dramatic. A dropped plate, burnt food, someone slamming drawers like a percussion concert. No. Ours started over chopped vegetables. Yes, vegetables. Human emotions are embarrassing like that. It was late afternoon in our Danish apartment, the kind of gray winter light that makes everything look slightly sad, even the carrots. I was cutting them too slowly, apparently. My partner walked in, glanced at the board and said, "You're cutting them uneven again." Not rude. Not angry, just factual. But my brain, it translated that sentence into a full Shakespearean tragedy. You're failing. You're not enough. Even your carrots are disappointing. And suddenly something in my chest tightened the way plastic wraps stick to your fingers. Annoying, clinging, unavoidable. I snapped back with something equally stupid. "Well, you always criticize everything I do." Silence. But not the peaceful kind, the kind that hums like electricity before a storm. They put the pan down a little too loudly. I crossed my arms like a dramatic teenager. And then it happened. We fought about everything except the real thing. We talked about chores, schedules, dishes. Classic decoys the mind chooses when it's terrified of vulnerability. Psychology would call this misplaced conflict, where the fight is never about vegetables or the trash or who forgot to buy milk. It's about emotional needs that have been quietly starving. But the brain hates admitting hunger, so it lashes out over carrots instead. Humans are weird. Eventually my voice cracked, not from anger but from exhaustion. And that tiny crack was all the truth needed to slip through. Out of nowhere I blurted, "I feel like I'm failing you." The words landed between us like a dropped knife. Sharp, unexpected, too honest. My partner froze. Their face softened in a way I hadn't seen for months. "Failing me," they said. "I thought I was the one failing you." And just like that, the room changed. The tension didn't disappear. It melted, like snow the moment the sun decides to show up after hiding for 3 weeks. We both stood there, holding truths we had been terrified to speak. Turns out, neither of us was angry. We were scared. Scared of disappointing each other. Scared of saying the wrong thing. Scared the silence meant we were losing something precious. There's a painful beauty in realizing your argument wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Sometimes you have to bump into each other the wrong way before you remember how to reach for each other the right way. And that kitchen, with its uneven vegetables and half-heated pan, became the first place where our walls finally cracked. The punchline? It was never about the carrots. It was about the courage to tell the truth. Learning to hear each other. Have you ever noticed how children listen? Not politely. Not logically. They listen with their whole face. Wide eyes, tilted head, eyebrows doing acrobatics, because they're trying to understand a world that doesn't speak their language yet. I didn't realize it then, but that's exactly what our marriage needed. Not better communication, not more romance, but the bravery to listen like children again. No filters. No assumptions. No prepared counterarguments waiting to fire back like a legal debate. After the kitchen fight, something shifted between us. Not magically, not instantly, but subtly, like the house had exhaled. The next morning we sat together in the living room. No phones. No distractions. Just two tired humans who suddenly realized silence wasn't a shield. It was a wall. And walls don't fall by themselves. Someone has to knock. I remember my partner looking at me with this hesitant, almost fragile expression. Can I tell you something without you getting upset? That sentence alone could trigger anyone's internal alarm system. Immediately my heart raced. My brain started preparing backup excuses, exit strategies, emotional armor. But then something odd happened. I stopped myself. Literally paused my thoughts like hitting the spacebar on a video. And I said, I'm listening. Not the robotic version. The real one. The kind kids say when they're curious. They took a breath. Sometimes I feel like you don't let me help. Like you're carrying everything alone. And it makes me feel unnecessary. The word unnecessary hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. It was soft, but it cut clean. My turn came next. I told them that I didn't reject help. I just didn't want to be a burden. The fear of being too much had built an entire imaginary distance between us. So, unintentionally, we were both trying to protect each other by not asking for anything. And ironically, that's what made us feel unloved. Humans love to complicate simple things. But neuroscience has a beautiful explanation here. When someone truly listens to you, eye contact soft, voice steady, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the same chemical babies get from being held. It literally tells your nervous system, you're safe. Keep talking. No wonder we felt closer in that moment than in months. That morning we didn't fix everything. We didn't solve every issue. We didn't suddenly become perfect communicators with golden relationship skills. What we did do was start small. Ridiculously small. We practiced repeating back what the other said. Not like therapists do, but like kids learning new words. I hear you. I didn't know you felt that way. Thank you for telling me. Tiny phrases. Tiny movements. Tiny cracks of light through an old wall. The truth? Listening isn't a skill. It's a decision. One you have to make again and again, even on the days when you're tired, cranky, or emotionally allergic to honesty. The punchline. Sometimes the best way to save a marriage is to shut up. Not in silence, but in stillness, so you can finally hear the person you love. Small piece on a Danish street. Imagine walking down a quiet street in Aarhus, Denmark. The kind of street where cobblestones glisten after rain and bicycles glide silently past, carrying people who look like they've got their lives perfectly together. And there you are, feeling like a complete emotional mess, carrying months of unspoken words between you and your partner. That's exactly where I found a tiny, unexpected peace. One of those moments that reminds you life doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. It was late afternoon, the winter sun hanging low and soft. We decided to take a walk after dinner, hoping the cold air would shake off the tension from earlier in the week. The streets were almost empty, Just a few people hurriedly crossing intersections. And that's when it hit me. In this silence, in this simplicity, I could finally breathe. No distractions, no obligations, no lingering expectations. Just us. Walking. Side by side. That we didn't start talking immediately. Sometimes words aren't necessary. Sometimes holding a hand or matching your steps to someone else's says more than any sentence. And as we moved along those quiet streets, I realized something crucial. Relationships don't need constant fireworks to survive. They need these small, steady moments, tiny breaths of understanding and patience that build trust over time. I remember glancing at my partner and catching a smile that had been buried under weeks of tension. Not forced, not polite. Genuine. And that tiny gesture was enough to remind me why we were together in the first place. Neuroscience even supports this. Small positive interactions release oxytocin, reduce stress, and strengthen bonds. Sometimes the most profound progress happens in the quietest spaces, not the loud confrontations. We started sharing little stories from our day. Nothing important, just snippets that made us laugh or shake our heads. It felt ridiculously ordinary. Yet in that ordinary moment, something extraordinary was happening. We were reconnecting. Brick by brick, moment by moment, step by step. And I noticed that the more we let ourselves experience these small peaceful interactions, the easier it became to drop the shields we had been holding up for months. The punchline? Love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And if you pay attention, even the faintest whisper can guide you back to warmth, back to understanding, back to each other. When the door finally opened, there comes a moment in every relationship where all the small cracks, silences, and unspoken words converge, and suddenly the door you've been too scared to open swings wide. For us, that moment happened one chilly evening in our Copenhagen apartment, the kind where the city lights shimmer against the snow, painting the world in a magical, fragile glow. It felt like the universe was quietly nudging us, saying, "It's time to step inside." I remember sitting on the couch side by side but still slightly apart, our hands barely touching. The weight of months of distance pressed down like an invisible blanket. My partner looked at me with eyes that were both wary and hopeful, a mixture that could make your heart ache. And in that quiet tension, I realized something important. Courage isn't loud. It's small, quiet, relentless. And it often begins with a single sentence that I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar thump of fear in my chest, and said, "I've been scared to tell you how lonely I felt." The words were simple, but their impact was monumental. My partner's eyes widened for a moment, then softened, and finally they spoke. "I was scared too. I thought I was failing you." Just like that, the walls we had built crumbled. Not instantly, but enough to let the light in. The door was no longer imaginary. It was real, tangible, and waiting for us to walk through together. We spent the next hour talking. Not in rehearsed phrases or polite half-truths, but in raw honesty. We spoke about fears, frustrations, and the longing we'd buried under routines and expectations. Every word released a little tension. Every pause allowed us to breathe a bit easier. Every small laugh reminded us of why we had chosen each other in the first place. The room, once tense and cold, felt warmer, brighter, safer. Science backs this up. Emotional vulnerability with a trusted partner activates the brain's reward circuits, releasing dopamine and oxytocin, making closeness feel addictive and healing. Who knew honesty could feel so sweet? And here's the most profound lesson. Opening the door isn't just about big confessions or dramatic gestures. It's about daring to be human, daring to show weakness, daring to hope that the person beside you will meet you halfway. The first step is always the hardest, but once it's taken, everything else becomes a little lighter, a little easier, a little more possible. The punchline? Sometimes the doors we fear most hold the greatest love. You just have to trust yourself and each other enough to step through. Your own door awaits. Now imagine this. The snow has stopped falling, the streets of Denmark glisten softly under the streetlights, and you realize the most important door in your life isn't some dramatic locked portal. It's the one right in front of you, the one you've been too afraid to open. That's what I want you to take from my story. Our marriage taught me that love isn't about perfection, grand gestures, or flawless communication. It's about courage, patience, and showing up, even when fear whispers that giving up is easier. After months of silence, misunderstandings, and awkward attempts at connection, we finally learned the value of small, consistent actions. Saying, "I hear you," even when it feels trivial. Pausing to truly listen even when the mind wants to argue. Holding hands without speaking. Letting presence speak louder than words. These tiny moments, simple, often overlooked, are the hinges that swing open doors we thought were closed forever. Your marriage, your relationship, or even your connection with someone you care about deeply has its own door. It might feel stuck, cold, or heavy. But remember, a door doesn't open because you push with all your might. It opens because someone finally turns the knob, sometimes gently, sometimes with trembling hands, and decides to step inside. It's not magic. It's intention, courage, and persistence. I want you to ask yourself, what's stopping you from stepping through your door? Fear of rejection? Past mistakes? Pride? Whatever it is, know this: the silence, the distance, the walls, they're not permanent. They're signals. And signals are meant to guide you, not trap you. In our case, acknowledging the fear, sharing the truth, and embracing vulnerability became the keys that unlocked not just a door, but a deeper bond and renewed love. So today, take a deep breath. Look at your own door and see it clearly. Maybe it's time to open it, to walk in, and to embrace the imperfect, messy, yet profoundly beautiful reality of connection. Small steps, tiny words, a courageous heart. That's all it takes. The punchline? Life is too short to stand frozen outside the doors that lead to love, understanding, and growth. Your door is waiting. Step in.